particularly media people. They want to use this binary thing. This is what I saw. That is not, it's not climate change. It is the climate of Los Angeles. The climate of Los Angeles.
What if one day the wind shifted in just the right way, sparking a fire in the perfect spot that could sweep across Los Angeles and reach the ocean? Joe Rogan once raised this unsettling possibility, and as wildfires in California intensify, his warning is sounding less like a distant prediction and more like an approaching reality. In this video, we examine Rogan's chilling foresight, his personal experiences with wildfires, and the troubling science behind why Los Angeles may be facing an even greater risk than before. Joe Rogan's ominous forecast. Joe Rogan's warning about a catastrophic wildfire threatening Los Angeles has evolved from a casual concern to a terrifyingly plausible scenario. It all began in 2024 on the Joe Rogan Experience when Rogan recalled a conversation with a firefighter from years earlier. The firefighter had warned him, "One day, the wind will be just right, the fire will start in just the right place, and it will burn through LA all the way to the ocean." Rogan's recount of this conversation was filled with unease. He described a fire spreading so rapidly and widely that even seasoned firefighters would be powerless against it. His message was clear: once the right conditions aligned, drought-stricken vegetation, powerful Santa Ana winds, and urban sprawl, the fire would be unstoppable. Though Rogan spoke about this terrifying possibility for years, its reality didn't truly hit until later. Wildfires had always been a part of California's landscape, but they were usually confined to rural or mountainous areas. Over time, however, the fires grew larger and began to reach urban areas, including Los Angeles. Rogan experienced the threat firsthand in 2018 when he and his family had to evacuate from their home in Bell Canyon, Ventura County, as the Woolsey Fire quickly approached. Watching the fire's fast and destructive path, Rogan realized just how vulnerable urban areas like Los Angeles were to such disasters. It was no longer just about protecting wilderness, it was about safeguarding homes, communities, and livelihoods. With his personal experience and growing knowledge of wildfire science, Rogan's warnings became even more urgent. What once seemed like a distant possibility now felt inevitable. It wasn't about if a fire would strike, but when. In 2019, during a conversation on climate change with journalist David Wallace Wells, Rogan referenced predictions from scientists who warned that California's wildfires could increase in intensity by 64 times by the century's end. For Rogan, the threat wasn't just about climate change, it was about the rapid transformation of California itself. With a growing population and more homes being built in fire-prone areas, the scenario painted by the firefighters seemed less like speculation and more like an impending disaster. When prediction becomes reality, the 2025 LA wildfires. In January 2025, Los Angeles faced one of its most destructive wildfire seasons. What began as small fires in the surrounding mountains quickly escalated into uncontrollable blazes, consuming both wildlands and urban neighborhoods. The scale and intensity of the fires seemed to confirm Joe Rogan's long-standing warnings. This was no longer a hypothetical disaster, it was unfolding in real time. The fire season kicked off with two major blazes, the Palisades Fire and the Eaton Fire. Both ignited in the hills surrounding Los Angeles and rapidly turned into massive infernos, overwhelming firefighting efforts. Rogan had repeatedly warned about the dangerous combination of climate, geography, and wind patterns in Southern California, and he had predicted the very conditions that fueled these wildfires. Extreme heat, severe drought, and powerful Santa Ana winds created the perfect storm for destruction. The Palisades Fire, which began in western Los Angeles, was one of the first signs that this fire season would be catastrophic. What started as a small brush fire quickly grew into a massive blaze, with wind spreading embers across dry terrain. Within hours, the fire tore through the Santa Monica Mountains, heading straight for Malibu. The flames, driven by the winds Rogan had predicted, became uncontrollable. Months of drought had left vegetation dry and vulnerable, allowing the fire to spread at an alarming pace. As it reached Malibu, it became evident that no area was safe. The fire didn't stop at the hills, it advanced toward Santa Monica, Venice, and Pacific Palisades. Many residents, who once thought their coastal homes were safe, suddenly found themselves in the fire's direct path. Mansions worth millions were engulfed by flames in a matter of hours. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the city, the Eaton Fire was wreaking havoc in eastern Los Angeles County. Starting in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, it quickly descended into populated neighborhoods. Like the Palisades Fire, this blaze spread rapidly, fueled by high winds and dry conditions. The fire tore through suburban areas like Altadena and Pasadena, forcing tens of thousands of residents to evacuate. For these communities, it was a rude awakening. No one, no matter how far from the wilderness, was truly safe from wildfires anymore. The 2025 fire season shattered the illusion that wildfires were only a problem for rural areas. It now engulfed the heart of Los Angeles, a city in crisis. The impact on Los Angeles in 2025 was devastating. More than 100,000 residents were forced to evacuate, and over 40,000 acres were scorched. Entire communities with decades of history were completely destroyed. For areas like Malibu, Santa Monica, and Venice, the fires served as a grim reminder that even the wealthiest, most developed neighborhoods were vulnerable to nature's fury. The flames spread so quickly that many residents had only minutes to evacuate, leaving behind homes, belongings, and memories. As the city grappled with the aftermath, one thing became painfully clear: Joe Rogan's warning had come true. The firestorm he had warned about for years was no longer a distant possibility. It was a harsh, undeniable reality. The question now was, can anything be done to prevent future fires of this magnitude? Or is this just the beginning of an era of unstoppable wildfires in Southern California? As residents scrambled to flee, escape routes became clogged with traffic, trapping many in their desperate attempts to outrun the flames. The fire surged relentlessly toward the coast, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ashes, homes, schools, businesses, and cultural landmarks consumed by the inferno. Malibu, once thought to be a safe haven from wildfires, was now filled with thick smoke and towering flames, and even the iconic oceanfront properties offered no refuge from the destruction. The 2025 wildfires also highlighted a striking fact: even high-profile celebrities were not immune to nature's wrath. Malibu, long a haven for Hollywood's elite, was hit especially hard. Celebrities like Paris Hilton, Mandy Moore, and the Kardashian family were among those forced to evacuate. Paris Hilton, known for her luxury lifestyle, faced a harrowing escape as the fire neared her Malibu estate. Although she and her family managed to evacuate safely, her multi-million-dollar property was among the many damaged or lost. Hilton used her platform to raise awareness, noting that wealth and privilege couldn't shield anyone from nature's fury. For Mandy Moore, the fires represented yet another painful chapter. Having survived the 2018 Woolsey fire, Moore once again found herself fleeing, this time from her Altadena home. Though she and her family managed to evacuate, their home was destroyed. Moore shared her heartbreak with fans, emphasizing the urgent need for better fire management. The Kardashian-Jenner family, also affected, was forced to evacuate. Kim Kardashian, who had previously evacuated her Hidden Hills home during the 2018 wildfires, faced the same terrifying reality again. Although the family's homes ultimately survived, the destruction across Malibu was staggering. Kylie and Kendall Jenner were also forced to evacuate and documented their experiences on social media, reflecting on the widespread devastation. While media outlets focused on the celebrity losses, the real devastation was felt by ordinary families. By early January, the confirmed death toll had surpassed 10, with more expected as recovery efforts continued. Thousands of families lost their homes, businesses, and livelihoods, often with little financial safety net to cushion the blow. The fires of 2025 drove home a harsh truth: wildfires were no longer confined to rural areas. They were now a direct threat to even the wealthiest and most densely populated parts of California. While celebrity losses made headlines, the true tragedy lay in the countless families who lost everything. As the fires continued to rage, Joe Rogan's warning from years earlier felt eerily prophetic. He had long described the terrifying possibility of an unstoppable firestorm fueled by the perfect mix of dry brush, winds, and unforgiving terrain. In 2025, his worst fears became a reality. The Palisades Fire and Eaton Fire were precisely the kind of infernos he had predicted, unstoppable blazes that defied containment efforts. For Los Angeles, the 2025 fires were more than just another wildfire season, they were a wake-up call. Rogan's words, once dismissed as speculation, now echoed through the chaos of the unfolding disaster. No one, not even those with multimillion-dollar estates, was immune. The devastation was a stark reminder of California's increasing vulnerability to wildfires, worsened by climate change and urban sprawl. As the fires began to subside, Los Angeles was left to face the enormity of the disaster. Rebuilding would require more than just restoring homes and businesses, it would demand a reckoning with the urgent need for better fire prevention, climate action, and emergency preparedness. The tragedy of 2025 made one thing clear: the warnings had been ignored for too long. The question now was, would California be prepared when the next fire season arrived? Stay tuned to uncover how Joe Rogan's past experiences with wildfires led him to predict this catastrophic event. Joe Rogan's personal experience with wildfires. Joe Rogan's concerns about California's wildfire threat are not just theoretical, they are deeply personal, shaped by his own experience. In 2018, while living in Bell Canyon, Ventura County, Rogan faced the terrifying reality of a wildfire that nearly destroyed everything he had. The Woolsey Fire, one of the most destructive in California's history, forced him and thousands of others to evacuate as flames tore through the land. The Woolsey Fire started near Malibu in early November 2018, spreading rapidly due to dry conditions, high winds, and an already volatile fire season. In just a few days, it consumed over 97,000 acres, destroying forests, ranches, and neighborhoods. Even seasoned firefighters struggled to control the blaze, and entire communities were left scrambling to escape. For Rogan, this was a wake-up call. The fire was no longer a distant threat, it was an unstoppable force that endangered his home, family, and way of life. Seeing the destruction firsthand only strengthened his belief that it was only a matter of time before Los Angeles faced an even worse wildfire. His message was clear: with the right conditions, a fire could ignite in the wrong place at the wrong time and spread all the way to the ocean. What was once considered an unlikely worst-case scenario was now an undeniable reality. The experience of the Woolsey Fire was deeply personal for Rogan. Living just a short distance from where the fire began, he was caught in the chaos of evacuation. It felt like trying to outrun a monster, he later recalled. The streets were gridlocked with people fleeing, the air was thick with smoke, and panic was everywhere. Rogan, an advocate for self-reliance, was struck by the helplessness of the moment. It wasn't just unsettling, it was a terrifying brush with disaster. As the flames spread through the hills, Rogan and his family had to evacuate, unsure if their home would survive. Evacuation routes were clogged, and the heavy smoke made breathing difficult. Rogan spoke of the overwhelming dread not just from the sight of the flames on the horizon but from realizing how fast everything could change. One moment, you're just living your life, and the next, you're running for it, he reflected. This experience forced him to face the harsh truth of living in California's fire-prone regions. Although Rogan had long discussed the dangers of wildfires on his podcast, experiencing one firsthand gave him a new perspective. The threat was no longer an abstract concern, it was real. The Woolsey Fire wasn't just another headline, it was his home, his family, and his community at risk. The fire ultimately destroyed nearly 1,500 homes, making it one of the most devastating wildfires in California's history. The destruction left a lasting impact, and for Rogan, the familiar landscape he had known was reduced to ashes. Despite firefighters' tireless efforts, once the fire gained momentum, there was little that could be done to stop it. In the aftermath, Rogan took time to reflect on what the experience meant for people living in California's wildfire zones. On his podcast, he shared the emotional toll of the evacuation and the uncertainty of whether his home would survive. He highlighted how quickly the fire spread and how unprepared people were, especially in high-risk areas like Bell Canyon. "You think you can prepare for something like this," he admitted, "but when it happens, it's already too late." This experience gave him first-hand insight into the risks of living where urban areas meet wildfire-prone landscapes. The Woolsey Fire was more than just a disaster, it was a turning point for Rogan. It reinforced his belief in the need for greater awareness of wildfire dangers and gave his warnings new urgency. His concerns were no longer theoretical, they were deeply personal. The fire demonstrated how quickly life can change, strengthening his resolve to speak out about wildfire preparedness. What made his experience even more striking was the realization that his story wasn't unique. The Woolsey Fire was just one of many catastrophic blazes in California, a state where wildfires had become not just a rare occurrence, but an increasingly frequent and severe crisis. His close call made him even more vocal about the need for action. Over the years, Rogan continued to discuss wildfires on his podcast, urging his listeners to prepare and take precautions. He also became more outspoken about the factors contributing to California's worsening fire seasons, such as climate change, land mismanagement, and urban sprawl. The Woolsey Fire ultimately cemented Rogan's belief that California's wildfire crisis couldn't be ignored. His podcast discussions grew more urgent, and his warnings more emphatic. It was no longer just about staying informed, it was about recognizing that wildfires were becoming more frequent, intense, and destructive. Rogan's personal experience gave weight to his concerns, sparking deeper conversations about how the state could mitigate future fire risks. Ultimately, his close encounter with disaster reshaped his perspective, making his warnings more pressing. Rogan wasn't just sounding alarms, he was speaking from personal experience as someone who had lived through the terror of a wildfire. By sharing his story, he hoped to equip his audience with the knowledge and mindset needed to navigate a world where fires like the Woolsey Fire were no longer distant possibilities, but ever-present threats.